So today I'm going to be making a little bit of a suture video. We're going to be doing a mock closing up of the epidermis, the dermis of a canine spay. I have a little canine spay here. We're going to say a 45-pound medium-sized dog. The tools that I'm using aren't the real tools, but for this I would be using sharp operating scissors, tissue forceps, and I would be using maybe Mayo Hager needle holders. I would use a cutting needle because we're closing up. I would choose a monocryl, monofilament, synthetic absorbable suture, meaning it's just one strand and it's absorbable. Should be fully absorbed within 120 days. I would use a 2/0 for size selection for this medium-sized dog. In deciding size selection, it's kind of based off of mainly size of the animal, and it can be altered due to activity and location of the suture. If I were to go to 3/0, that would be a smaller suture, and if I would go to 0, that would be larger, but I think 2/0 would be fine for this canine. So in doing this suturing of just the dermis layer here, I would just start at the caudal end here. I would probably use like a simple interrupted appositional pattern. There shouldn't be much tension in this area, being that the owner follows, the resting of, 14 to 21 days with just leash walks, lowered activity. Everything should heal just fine. So doing this, you start at the caudal end. You use your tissue forceps to grab on the other side, your needle holders to feed through. I have a really long strand on accident. And then you would come in on the other side. And that's where you would make your knot, which isn't very good. And you would cut with your sharp operating scissors. And then you would do that same thing again. And you would cut. At the end of the incision, if there are still knots that aren't quite buried all the way, you can use tissue glue and kind of bring the extra tissue up around them so they're not as visible. Good to ensure the animal wears an Elizabethan collar so they don't irritate the area. And no swimming or bathing for 14 to 21 days is also a good protocol, so we're not introducing any extra bacteria things. Trying to think of what I didn't cover and talking about, using the simple interrupted, which basically means that I am crossing over, making a knot, cutting, and then moving about a few millimeters forward, and then doing that same thing, and then appositional, meaning on either side. This is a non-tension relieving pattern, like I said, but this is pretty typical for spays and neuters, at least at the practice that I work at. So I'm going to make my last little knot here. And we're all closed up. It's not the prettiest thing. There's some definite edges, loose edges I can cut here. In this case, I'd probably use some tissue glue, and I would just use an aseptic technique, make sure the tip of the glue is sterilized. We often use different tips each time. It comes with a big pack of them, and just line it right along there and kind of push it up and bury those knots so it's a nice clean closure there. Monofilament's nice for this because it's easier to pass than a braided suture. Again, using the cutting needle for closing up. Tapered needles are more for like organs and other soft tissues. I know that suture and things like that are definitely interchangeable between veterinarian preference, things like that. Thing to watch for after the animal is sent home is definitely redness around the site or any leaking or anything like that. So in your surgical discharge, just make sure the owner watches for redness, irritation, heat, just anything out of the ordinary going on in that area. And I think that is all. Thanks.